As Isaiah's blood stained the snow, the sound of hooves closed in from all sides. With a wounded Apache girl in his arms and nowhere to run, he had one choice: fight or die. But when the deputy, his old friend, aimed a rifle at him, the truth hit hard. Greeley had already won. The land was his, the law was his, and now Isaiah's past would either haunt him into submission or push him to take everything back. But just as he prepared to face the inevitable, the deputy lowered his rifle and whispered, "You've been played, Isaiah. Greeley's got everyone fooled." The map Isaiah had been clutching, the one that could change everything, wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a ticket to something far worse. With his back against the wall and the town closing in, Isaiah had to choose: expose the truth or disappear into the night. The clock's ticking. Who will make it out alive? Let me know where you're watching from. Snow blew sideways across the high ridge, sharp as ground glass, cutting through Isaiah Cole's coat as if he weren't wearing one at all. He shifted the small Apache girl higher on his back, feeling her blood warm against his collar. It was Christmas Eve, Lord's night, and he hadn't planned on shouldering another man's war. But the child's fingers had clung to him with a strength that didn't match her size, and he'd heard her breath hitch like a dying bird. A man didn't walk past that. Not tonight. Not ever. Hoofbeats echoed somewhere behind him. Slow. Searching. Raiders. Isaiah didn't look back. He dropped low behind a row of wind-bent junipers, brushing his boot tracks with a broken branch. The girl stirred when the wind knifed across the ridge. He felt her flinch, felt her breath go shallow again. "Hold on," he muttered. "Just hold on, little one." Her answer was a soft sound, half pain, half warning. Isaiah caught it. He angled toward the narrow rock crease that split the ridge in two. Only men who'd ridden these lands season after season knew the cutoff. Raiders wouldn't risk a horse in there. Too steep. Too slick with early snow. His boots slid twice before he found purchase. He pulled the girl closer, her weight slight as a sack of flour, but heavy with something else. Responsibility, maybe. Or judgment. Only God knew why she'd still been alive when he found her half buried in a drift, arrow cut fresh along her ribs. Another gust pushed dry snow across the world, blinding him for a breath. He whispered a prayer under it. "Lord, guide my steps. I can't see the path, so I'll follow your hand instead." When the wind eased, the ridge below opened, dark pines, a frozen creek like cracked glass, and farther down, a single warm light burning in the mission's window. May Whitlow kept that lantern going every winter, said it was for lost travelers, though most men in town claimed she kept it lit out of stubbornness. Isaiah didn't know the truth. He only knew he needed her, hands if he wanted the girl to last the night. The child sagged suddenly, her forehead falling against his neck. Isaiah tightened his hold. "Stay with me," he breathed. Her fingers twitched near his shoulder. He felt something pressed against his coat, something small and hard inside the leather pouch tied at her throat. He almost checked it. Almost. But the wind carried a sound that froze the urge. A whistle. Short. Then two more. Raider's signal. Isaiah took the last stretch at a half-run, half-slide, bursting through the tree line as the mission steps came into view. He knocked once, hard. The lantern inside flickered. The door cracked open 3 inches. May Whitlow's face appeared in the gap, pale in the lamplight. Her eyes went straight to the child on his back. They widened, but not in fear. Calculation. Resolve. "Inside," she said. "Quickly." Isaiah shouldered through. May barred the door with a timber plank, blew out the second lantern, and pointed to the narrow cot near the stove. "Lay her down. Keep pressure here." Her hands were already rolling up her sleeves. She didn't ask why he had an Apache girl in his arms on Christmas Eve. Didn't ask who was behind them or what trouble was riding the ridge. She simply pressed a folded cloth to the wound and reached for the kettle. Steam hissed. Blood seeped through the cloth. The girl's breath hitched again. May leaned close, her voice firm but low. "She's burning up. Arrow cut isn't deep, but she's lost too much heat." Isaiah removed his gloves, setting them near the stove. He didn't speak. He'd spent years keeping his words locked behind his teeth. Words got a man judged before actions did. The girl murmured something. 2, maybe 3 words, slipping between fever and fear. May bent down, catching the sound. "Greeley, seal, water," she repeated quietly. Isaiah's jaw tightened. Greeley, a name he knew too well. A man with money, men, and motives crooked as river alder. Whatever the girl carried in that pouch, men like Greeley would kill to reclaim it. Outside, snow tapped the mission windows, steady as fingers drumming on a coffin lid. May cleaned the wound expertly, tying a strip of cloth tight enough to slow the bleeding. "She needs rest, and food, and heat." She paused. "And she needs whoever's hunting her to lose the trail." Isaiah listened. The wind shifted. A second whistle cut through the dark. Closer. He lifted the girl again. May looked at him sharply. "They're not done searching," he said. "And they know she's alive." May stepped between him and the door, her chin lifting a fraction. "You can't outrun armed riders with a wounded child." "I don't plan to outrun them," Isaiah said quietly. "I plan to disappear." A third whistle answered the others, sharp as a blade on stone. Isaiah glanced at the window. "Looks like we've got minutes, maybe less." And somewhere outside, snow crunched. Under a boot that wasn't his, the knocking came again, closer, sharper, like someone testing the wood of the doorframe. May's fingers froze for half a heartbeat before she moved, swift and controlled, pulling the shutter closed with a soft click. She didn't waste breath on fear. Women alone on the frontier didn't get that luxury. "Carry her," she whispered. "Back room, no light." Isaiah followed, boots silent on the worn pine floor. The mission's hallway was narrow, smelling of old books, winter soap, and cedar smoke from the stove. He laid the child on a pallet set beneath a cross carved into the wall. May dropped to her knees beside the girl, her hands already working, checking pulse, testing the heat of her skin with the back of her wrist, pressing 2 fingers gently along the ribs where the arrow had grazed. "She's dehydrated," May murmured. "Shock coming on." Isaiah handed her a folded cloth from the shelf. She pressed it to the girl's forehead, then leaned in until she could hear the child's breath. The girl whispered something, barely sound at all. May caught it. Same words. Greeley, seal, water. Her voice hardened on the last word. Outside, snow brushed the roof in long strokes. A horse snorted. Leather creaked. A man breathed the way hunters breathe when they know they're close. May's eyes flicked to the door. They'll search this place. Not if we're gone. You can't move her far, she said sharply. Not in her state. Isaiah didn't argue. He only crouched beside the pallet, adjusting the blanket over the girl's legs. He could feel the struggle inside himself. One part calculating every exit, every blind corner of the yard. The other part listening to the small, broken breaths of the child he shouldn't have stopped for, but did. Christmas Eve or not, the Lord had set her in his path. And the Lord didn't set things by accident. Another knock. Not the door this time. Wooden siding, a fist dragging along it like a question. May moved before Isaiah could. She strode to the shelf, pulled down a strip of cloth, dipped it into hot water, and wrung it out with quick, sure hands. She needs warmth, May said. Move the stove shield. He obeyed, pulling the iron guard aside. Heat spilled across the floorboards, warming the air around the girl. May lifted her chin slightly as Isaiah worked. Thank you, she said. Simple, honest. Isaiah paused. Words like that weren't common in his world. The girl stirred again, whispering in Apache. May leaned close, listening with the focus of a needle threader. Isaiah studied the small leather pouch at the girl's neck. The binding cord had rubbed her skin raw. Whatever she carried, she guarded it even in unconsciousness. He reached to loosen it slightly, just enough so it wouldn't cut deeper. Her tiny hand shot up, gripping his wrist with surprising force. Isaiah froze. May saw it too. Saw the instinct, the terror, the warning locked in that small hand. She doesn't want it touched, May said quietly. Not even by the man who saved her. A sound broke the moment. A boot thudding on the wooden porch. Isaiah moved instantly. He crossed the room, blew out the lamp, and pressed his back to the wall beside the doorway. Darkness folded around him. He heard his own heartbeat, heard the breathing of the men outside, heard May's steady whisper near the stove, praying under her breath in a way that didn't sound like ritual, but plea. Lord, shield the innocent, blind the cruel, guide our hands tonight. A hinge groaned. Someone tried the doorknob. Isaiah's hand dropped to his revolver. May hissed, "No gunfire. They'll burn the mission." Another try, harder, a curse outside. Then hoofbeats fast, breaking the tension for a second before tightening it again. A rider approached from the east, snow crunching under hooves. A new voice called out. "Checking the mission," the man barked. Jonah Pike. Deputy, young, nervous, still owed Isaiah for a winter long past. May exhaled, barely audible. The raiders stepped back as Jonah dismounted. Isaiah heard coat leather flex, heard Jonah's boots hit the porch. "You boys got business here?" Jonah asked. A pause. Snow shifted. "We heard someone ran this way." "Tracks swing south," Jonah said flatly. "I followed 'em myself. You're wasting time." The raiders murmured among themselves. One spat, another mounted. Then, like smoke thinning in wind, they drifted off into the dark. The porch groaned once more as Jonah stepped closer to the door. "Isaiah," he whispered, "I know you're in there. And I know she's with you." Isaiah didn't move. "You've got riders circling the ridge," Jonah said, and Rudd came down from the bank this afternoon. Word is, they're looking to call in all debts tomorrow. First thing. Isaiah felt the weight shift inside his chest. A rancher could fight men. He couldn't fight paper. Jonah stepped back. You got hours. That's all. His boots faded toward his horse. May lit the lamp again, shielding its glow with her hand. We can't stay here, Isaiah. He stared at the girl, at her shallow breaths, at the pouch she guarded even in fever. No, he said, we can't. Outside, the night tightened like a noose, and somewhere in the dark, a whistle rose again, closer than before. The wind fell still for the first time that night. Too still. Isaiah had lived long enough to know that calm like that didn't come from mercy. It came from men holding their breath on the other side of the dark, waiting for movement. May knelt beside the child again, checking the bandage with quick, sure fingers. Her eyes moved with the focus of someone who'd patched more wounds than she'd spoken confessions. She didn't ask for details. She didn't demand explanations. She simply worked. Her pulse is thready, May whispered. If we move her before dawn, she might survive. If the cold doesn't take her first. Isaiah didn't answer. He was studying the small leather pouch pressed to the girl's chest. The cord had rubbed her collarbone raw, and the pouch itself was worn smooth from years of clutching. The girl had grabbed his wrist hard enough to bruise when he touched it earlier. Whatever was inside wasn't a trinket. It was something she'd been willing to die protecting. May noticed where he was looking. We need to check for infection. That cord needs loosening. Isaiah hesitated. The girl's breathing was shallow, rattling like a loose hinge. He slid a finger under the cord to ease the pressure. As he did, the pouch tilted, and something inside shifted with the soft clink of metal. May's eyebrows rose. Isaiah, she murmured. We may not have the luxury of ignorance. He pulled the pouch open half an inch. Just enough. A tightly folded square of paper, edges browned with time, and beneath it, a small brass key, dulled but unbroken. Before he could study either, the girl's hand snapped upward, clamping around his wrist. Her eyes were half open but unfocused, fever bright and terrified. She whispered a broken syllable, one he didn't know, but didn't need to understand. He closed the pouch instantly and lifted her hand away with care. All right, he said softly. All right, little one. I hear you. May leaned in. Her breath caught when she saw the outline of the key through the leather. That's not a child's keepsake. That's evidence. Isaiah, do you understand what this could mean? He did. Too well. Paper and metal. Those were the things that could move sheriffs, shift borders, kill men legally. The kind of things Silas Greeley collected the way other men collected Bible verses. A harsh crunch sounded outside the mission wall, boot on frozen snow. May's hand went to the lamp, ready to snuff the flame. Isaiah lifted a finger. Wait. Another sound. 2 soft taps. A pause. Then one more. A signal he didn't recognize. May whispered, They're scouting, checking for shadows. Isaiah crossed the room, eased the shutter open a fraction of an inch. A figure moved near the corner of the stable, just a blur of dark coat and the glint of metal under moonlight. Then another figure, and another. 3 riders. No torches. no lanterns. Men who wanted darkness to do the talking. May's voice thinned. Isaiah, what do they want with her? He answered with the one truth he knew. Something she won't give up. A hand pounded the front door. Once, twice, slow and deliberate. Not raiders this time. Someone who believed he had the right to knock. May tensed. Isaiah's jaw locked. Stay with her. He strode to the main room, drawing only half his revolver, enough to be ready without flashing intent. He cracked the door. Deputy Jonah Pike slipped inside like a shadow, breathless and sweating despite the cold. You need to move, Jonah said, voice trembling. Now! They're not just raiders, Isaiah. They're looking for something she took off a dead man. Something with Greeley's seal on it. The air inside the mission thinned. May stepped forward from the hallway. What kind of seal? Jonah hesitated, not out of secrecy, but fear. Land office. Water rights. Something Greeley's men buried last summer. They said the tribe stole it, but that girl, she's the one that got out alive. Isaiah felt the words hit like a hammer on cold steel. Water rights. Greeley. Dead men. Pieces slid together with the sound of a lock turning. May looked sharply at Isaiah. The key. Jonah didn't hear her. He was already moving toward the back door. They'll search every cabin before dawn, and Rudd's coming to your ranch at sunrise with bank papers. You've got 2 storms chasing you, Isaiah. You better pick which one kills slower. A whistle split the night. Closer, sharper, hungrier. Isaiah pulled the child into his arms again, her head rolling onto his shoulder. May grabbed her satchel, slipping in extra bandages, a jar of salve, and a coil of thread. Where? May asked. Isaiah didn't hesitate. Away from here. Jonah grabbed his arm hard. Then go now, before they circle back. Outside, snowflakes drifted sideways again, soft at first, too soft, the way snow falls when the sky's holding its breath. Isaiah stepped into it. The girl clutched tight, May on his heels. Behind them, the mission lantern swayed once in the wind, then went dark. Wind cut across the mission yard as Isaiah and May pushed through the drifting snow, the girl's small weight against Isaiah's chest, barely enough to warm his coat. Behind them, Jonah's horse pawed the ground, restless, sensing the same danger that pressed cold against Isaiah's spine. They'll be on you inside 10 minutes, Jonah warned. Maybe less. Isaiah didn't break stride. Which road's clean? None. But South Ridge buys you time. Jonah hesitated, then reached into his coat. There's something else. He handed Isaiah a folded paper, thin, official, creased at the edges. Isaiah didn't have to open it to recognize the bank's seal, Caleb Rudd's signature. His stomach tightened. Inspection at sunrise, Jonah said quietly. If you're not there, or if you're in trouble with the law, they take the ranch. May looked sharply at Isaiah. You said nothing about a debt. Not your burden, he answered. She held his stare a moment, long enough to understand he hadn't been hiding it out of pride, but because there wasn't time to explain a lifetime's worth of battles. She faced Jonah again. What happens if he's late? She asked. Jonah's jaw clenched. He loses everything. Wind pushed harder. Another whistle carried through the trees, closer now, sliding like a blade under the ribs. Isaiah gripped the girl tighter. We go. They moved fast, south toward the cut ridge. Isaiah knew the path by heart. Narrow, rocky, half broken by spring floods. Dangerous in daylight. Worse now. But danger behind them was heavier than danger underfoot. Snow slapped Isaiah's face as he descended the first slope. May followed close, her breath coming hard but steady. The girl whimpered once, a thin, frayed sound, but didn't wake. "We need shelter," May said. "We'll have it," Isaiah answered. He could see it in his mind, the place he'd relied on more times than he'd admit. A shallow stand of pines near a frozen creek, hidden from the road by fallen stone. But the ridge fought him tonight. Boots slipped. Snow crust cracked under weight. More than once he had to press the girl to his chest with one arm, while grabbing a jut of rock with the other to keep from pitching forward. At the base of the ridge, the world quieted. Too quiet. No wind. No birds. Just the slow pulse of danger closing in. May stepped beside him, one hand on her cloak, the other gripping her satchel. "She's fading. We don't have hours, Isaiah." "We don't," he agreed. "We have minutes." They pressed on, the creek frozen solid beneath a skin of icy quartz. Every step snapped faintly, loud in the hush. Isaiah knew raiders could track sound faster than tracks. He slowed, adjusting his stride to dull the noise. "What did Jonah mean?" May asked. "Greeley's seal, water, land." Isaiah didn't look at her. "Men like Greeley buy judges and starve ranches until folks walk away from their own land. Water rights make it easier." "And that key?" she pressed. He tightened his grip on the girl. "Whatever it opens, it scares them enough to kill for it." They reached the pines, dark shapes hunched against the wind, branches heavy with snow. Isaiah lowered the girl onto a bed of dry needles, and May kneeled, brushing the frost from the child's lips. "She's colder than before," May warned. "We can't keep moving at this pace." Isaiah scanned the tree line. "We're not staying long." May lit a small fire, nothing more than a handful of twigs, and a spark struck from the iron. Flames licked weakly in the wind. Isaiah crouched, pulling the girl closer to the heat. Her lips trembled, eyes fluttered. She whispered again, just one word. "Water." May leaned in. "She keeps saying it." Isaiah lowered his voice. "There's a damn reason Greeley wants her." He unfolded the bank paper Jonah had given him. Words he already knew stared back at him. Foreclosure notice. Inspection at sunrise. Transfer pending. A deadline printed in black ink. Cold. Final. May saw the paper in his hands. Her face shadowed with something between anger and understanding. "If we go to Silver Creek, you risk losing your ranch." "If we don't," Isaiah said, "we lose her and proof of everything she's carrying." A branch snapped somewhere behind the pines. Isaiah's hand dropped to his gun. May put the fire out with a swift sweep of her cloak. Darkness slammed down again. Boots on snow, more than one pair, moving slow, searching. May whispered, "They tracked us." Isaiah gathered the girl, rising in one smooth motion. "We move," he said. "Now." A whistle answered from the ridge, another from the creek. A third, closest of all, cut through the cold like a brand against skin. Isaiah looked toward the dark tree line. They're closing the circle. Snow blurred the world into shifting shapes as Isaiah pushed May and the girl toward the old supply road. The ridge behind them echoed with the soft, measured crunch of boots, raiders fanning out, tightening their pattern like wolves closing on a wounded deer. He didn't need to see them to know they were there. The land carried the sound straight to his bones. A quarter-mile ahead sat an abandoned wood hauler's wagon, half sunk into snow, its bed stacked with last season's branches. Isaiah hadn't planned on hiding a half-conscious child and a mission teacher inside it tonight. But plans didn't matter when death was on your heels. "Inside," he murmured. May didn't argue. She climbed into the wagon bed, clearing a space between bundles of split pine. Isaiah lifted the girl in, settling her into May's arms. Her skin was ice cold beneath the blanket. Too cold. Isaiah scanned the tree line, then grabbed 2 pine branches and began brushing away their tracks behind them, sweeping snow back into place with fast, practiced strokes. "The ridge is closing," May whispered from inside the wagon. "Let 'em close," Isaiah answered. "They won't look for what they think's been abandoned." He climbed into the driver's seat and started the descent toward the creek crossing, letting the wagon creak and groan just enough to sound like old wood shifting under its own age. The girl coughed once, a thin crackle of sound that made May's hand clamp gently over her mouth. "Not yet," May whispered to the child. "Just a little longer." Isaiah slowed the wagon before the first bend. Fog rose from the creek ahead, a thin white veil drifting across the bridge. A dangerous place to gamble, but gamblers didn't survive long in these mountains. A figure stepped out of the fog. Isaiah's grip tightened around the reins. A man stood in the middle of the bridge, coat long, hat pulled low, badge glinting faint in the moonlight. Except it wasn't a badge, not a real one. Isaiah knew that shine, cheap metal hammered to look official. "Easy now," the man called. "Inspection order. Step down from the wagon." Isaiah felt the trap lock into place. 2 more men appeared behind the first, blocking the far end of the bridge. No lanterns. No horses in sight. These weren't deputies. They were Greeley's boys wearing the shape of law. Isaiah slid off the wagon. "Evenin'," he said, voice level. "Didn't know the county hired new inspectors." "Orders changed," the false deputy replied. "Need to check your haul. Can't be too careful with Apaches raiding tonight." Isaiah stepped closer, boots crunching softly. He didn't reach for his gun, not yet. "Just firewood," he said. "Nothing worth your time." The man smirked. "We'll decide that." He moved toward the wagon. Isaiah shifted his weight, fast but controlled, placing himself between the man and the wagon bed. "Wood's wood," Isaiah said. "Take your look from here." The raider's eyes narrowed. "Move." May's breath hitched from inside the pile of branches, barely audible, but Isaiah heard it. So did the man in front of him. The raider's hand hovered over his revolver. Isaiah needed a distraction. Fast. He snapped a branch from the wagon frame, tossed it hard down the slope. It clattered off stone and tumbled into the creek with a loud splash. All 3 raiders turned toward the sound. Isaiah didn't wait. He leapt backward, grabbed the nearest wheel rim, and shoved the wagon off the road with all his strength. Wood screamed against ice. The wagon lurched, tipping sideways off the embankment. May clutched the girl tight as the wagon slid. "Hold on," Isaiah barked, throwing himself after it. The false deputies shouted, stumbling to keep balance as snow gave way under their boots. The wagon hit the lower trail with a bone-rattling jolt, but stayed upright. God's mercy, or dumb luck. Isaiah landed beside it, breath tearing from his lungs. "This way," he hissed. He dragged May and the girl out of the heap of branches. Naya's eyes fluttered open, dark and glassy, searching for something only she could see. "We follow the creek," Isaiah said. "Wagon bought us a minute, maybe two." May nodded once, already running her hand along the child's forehead, checking for new bleeding. "She can't take much more." "She won't have to." Naya pointed weakly toward a shadowed break in the canyon wall, a narrow split where the stones had sheared decades ago in a spring washout. Isaiah recognized it instantly. "Path only locals know," he murmured. "Good eye, little one." He lifted her again, her arms falling around his neck in a limp, cold embrace. The raiders' voices rose behind them, anger sharpening their words. One fired a shot into the air, a signal. Another answered from the ridge. "They're spreading out," May said. "No," Isaiah rasped. "They're hunting." He pressed on toward the split path, boots slipping, breath burning in his throat. Snow thickened around them, swirling faster than before, carrying a sound that made the hair rise on the back of his neck. A long, low whistle. Then another. Then silence. Heavy, waiting. Isaiah didn't slow. Not until he felt the earth change beneath him. Stone under snow. A hidden descent. The narrow path yawned before them, dark as a grave. "We go in," he said. And behind them, the world above the ridge answered with a single, distant gunshot. Not at them, but calling the hunt forward. The split path narrowed until Isaiah had to turn his shoulders sideways to keep from scraping stone. Snow drifted overhead in thin ribbons, falling through cracks like sifted flour. The girl's breath fluttered against his collar. Too shallow, too light, slipping toward that line no man could pull her back from if she crossed it. May moved close behind him, one hand on the canyon wall, the other clutching her satchel tight. The wind died completely in the narrow cut, leaving only the burn of cold air and the muted roar of distant riders sweeping the upper ridge. "They'll reach the south crest soon," May whispered. "If they see fresh snow disturbed." "They won't," Isaiah said. "This path's been dead since the spring washout." The cut opened suddenly into a wide basin of snow and rock. The world brushed silver by moonlight. Frozen creek below. Road beyond that. A clearing carved out centuries ago by storms and river ice. To anyone passing on horseback above, it looked abandoned. But Isaiah didn't trust empty places. Not tonight. He knelt, adjusting the blanket around Naya's shoulders. Her eyes flickered open when he pressed a warm palm against her cheek. "Still with us," he murmured. A faint nod. Barely there. But enough. May crouched beside them. "We need to cross the creek before the ridge riders cut us off." Isaiah nodded. "Stay close." They trudged through the basin, boots whispering over powder. The creek's surface cracked under Isaiah's weight in thin spiderweb lines, groaning like old timber. On the far side, the supply road reappeared, rutted, windswept, and too quiet. Too quiet. Isaiah slowed. A shape stood at the bend of the road, half shrouded in drifting snow. Long coat, hat low, one hand resting, not casually, on the butt of a holstered gun. Isaiah muttered, Not tonight. Another man stepped out behind the first, then a third. They weren't wearing masks this time. They didn't need to. They wore the badge, or something shaped like it. May's breath caught. Deputies? No, Isaiah said. Look at the stance. Those aren't lawmen. The lead man lifted a hand, signaling Isaiah to stop. Evenin', the man called. Cold night to be wanderin' with a sick child. Isaiah stepped forward, silent, reading every inch of the man. Boots too clean, belt too new, badge too bright. What's your business? Isaiah asked. Our business, the man replied, is whatever walks this road tonight. Isaiah didn't move. Mission sent for help? Mission doesn't send for anything, the man said, smiling thinly. Open the bundle. May stiffened. She's injured. She needs warmth. Open, the man repeated. The bundle. Isaiah shifted the girl in his arms, keeping the pouch at her throat pressed against his coat. Her small hand twitched protectively toward it, even in fever. The man's eyes narrowed at the movement. We'll take her, he said. You're not equipped. Isaiah stepped back. She stays with me. That so? The false deputy asked. He tapped the metal pinned to his chest. Obstruction of law carries a penalty. Isaiah didn't blink. That badge carries none. A thin crack appeared in the man's composure. He lifted his hand. 2 more men emerged from the shadows on the side road, closing the circle. May whispered, Isaiah, I know. He weighed options. Too many guns. Too little ground. The creek ice behind them. The girl fading. May unarmed except for resolve and bandages. Isaiah raised his chin. You want to see what I'm carrying? The men stepped forward. Isaiah let out a slow breath. Then he dropped, fast, slamming his boot against the creek edge. The ice shattered in a sudden burst, dropping a slab of frozen surface into the water. Cold spray shot upward, catching the false deputies in the face. As they staggered, Isaiah grabbed May's arm and pulled her to the side, sprinting up the slope toward a stand of bare junipers. Gunfire cracked behind them, thudding into snow with dull impact. Go! Isaiah barked. May ran beside him, clutching the girl tight as Isaiah shielded their backs. A bullet shaved bark from a tree trunk. Another tore through Isaiah's coat sleeve. He didn't slow. Road forks ahead, he said through clenched teeth. Creek path or cattle trail. Which is safer? May gasped. Neither. Pick the one they won't. Naya stirred weakly, her fingers brushing Isaiah's arm, guiding, not pointing, not speaking, guiding. Toward the old cattle trail. Isaiah didn't question it. They veered left, plunging into the trees just as the false deputies reached the shattered creek edge, cursing, slipping, trying to regain their line. May's breath came in sharp bursts. The girl's head sagged against her shoulder. Isaiah glanced back once. Just once. Enough to see the men regrouping. Enough to see the shape of torches flaring near the upper ridge. Others joining them. And then one more sound cut through the mountainside. A whistle. Short. Answered by another. Then a third. A pattern. A command. Isaiah tightened his hold on May's arm and pushed deeper into the dark. They're calling the whole hunt down, he said. They know exactly who we are now. The trail ahead narrowed to a black ribbon through the pines. No way back. No way around. Only forward, into whatever waited next. The trees thinned as they reached the top of the ridge, and the trail disappeared into a narrow pass where the wind howled and the snow lashed sideways. Isaiah didn't slow. His eyes flicked to May, who was still holding the girl tight, her breath a steady rhythm despite the cold. Naya's head lolled to one side, her skin pale, a feverish sheen slicking her brow. The bundle in Isaiah's coat pocket weighed heavier than it had an hour ago. The paper inside, a simple piece of parchment that held all their lives in its folds, itched at the back of his mind. They reached the far side of the pass and dropped into a small hollow, the wind muffled here, but danger wasn't far. Every step took them deeper into the wilderness, away from anything they could call safety. The false deputies wouldn't stop, not until they had their hands on whatever they'd lost, or until they'd killed to cover their tracks. Isaiah gritted his teeth. He didn't need this fight. Didn't want it. But now the stakes were different. May's eyes were sharp. She hadn't spoken in a while, but she didn't need to. She had a quiet strength in the way she moved, the way she glanced at the surroundings, ever vigilant. "We'll rest here," Isaiah said, his voice low. "Keep the girl warm." May nodded, her gaze flicking to the bundle in his coat. "We need to look at that paper, now." Isaiah pulled the parchment from inside his coat and unrolled it. The wind whipped the edges, and he leaned into the fold to keep it steady. His fingers brushed over the markings, nothing more than ink scratches, but the seal on the bottom told a story that might as well have been written in blood. "Water rights," he muttered, as if speaking to himself. May's brow furrowed. "Where?" "Silver Creek," Isaiah said. "It's all tied up in this." May knelt beside him, her fingers brushing over the paper. This could change everything." Isaiah didn't answer. He didn't need to. His mind was already racing toward Silver Creek, toward the judge, the sheriff, the whole damn town. But the real question wasn't about Silver Creek. It was whether he could get there fast enough to make it count, or if the false deputies would be there first. The snow had stopped falling, but the silence in the hollow was heavy, like a blanket that muffled every thought, every movement, every breath. Isaiah heard it first, the crack of a twig underfoot. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing as he scanned the trees above. May's hand went to the knife at her side, her body tensing. Then came the whistle, sharp, cutting through the quiet like a knife. The sound of it was familiar, too familiar. Isaiah swore under his breath. The signal was unmistakable. Greeley's men had tracked them this far. May's eyes flicked toward the horizon. "They've circled. They know we're here. We won't outrun them." Isaiah's jaw tightened. "We don't have to outrun them. We just need to stay ahead." He turned, motioning for May to follow, and they set off toward a narrow canyon that cut through the ridge. The terrain was treacherous, with rocks jutting out at odd angles and the ground slick underfoot. Isaiah's boots crunched through the snow, and May stayed close behind him, her breath coming in sharp bursts. Naya stirred again, her fingers twitching in the blanket. "She's slipping," May said, her voice tight with concern. "We can't keep going like this. We need shelter. We need rest." Isaiah's gaze flicked to the darkening sky. The first sign of nightfall was coming, and with it, more danger. They'd be dead in the morning if they didn't find a safe place to hide. Ahead of them, the canyon narrowed, forcing them to slow. Isaiah's eyes darted to the sides, looking for anything. An outcrop, a crevice, something that might hide them from the men behind. A flash of movement in the rocks caught his attention, and he motioned to May. "There. We can make it to that outcrop before dark," Isaiah said, his voice low and steady. He reached for Naya, lifting her carefully, trying to keep the girl from shaking too much. They made it to the outcrop, the last barrier before the full reach of the night. Isaiah set Naya down gently, his hands still shaking from the cold and the weight of what was coming. The paper in his coat pocket burned through the layers of wool, a constant reminder that this fight wasn't just about survival. It was about everything. May knelt beside him, her hands steady as she arranged the girl in the blanket. Isaiah crouched beside her, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause. The silence was thick with unspoken words, the promise of things to come. "This isn't over," May said. Her eyes locked on Isaiah's. "No," Isaiah replied. "It's just beginning." As he watched the sky darken above them, the faintest glimmer of hope flickered in his chest. But he knew better than to trust it. In the world they lived in, hope didn't come free. Silver Creek was quieter than Isaiah had ever known it. The town stretched out under the darkening sky like a broken promise, the wind dragging through the dusty streets like an old ghost. Isaiah kept his head low, hood pulled over his brow, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the eyes of the town were on him. The last thing he needed was more attention. May followed close behind him, keeping Naya wrapped tightly in the blanket. The girl hadn't stirred since the canyon, but Isaiah knew that wouldn't last much longer. The fever was too high, the blood loss too great. They made their way to Mrs. Lynn's house. The small, crooked building was tucked away at the end of the street, just past the general store. Isaiah knocked once, then again, a little louder, before the door creaked open. Mrs. Lynn was a wiry woman with sharp eyes, and the only person in Silver Creek who might still have enough heart to help a man like Isaiah. She took one look at Naya, then motioned them inside. "Quickly," she whispered, shutting the door behind them. "Get her inside. The streets are crawling with Greeley's men." Isaiah's jaw clenched. He knew they didn't have much time. They had to act fast. The whole town was starting to smell the blood in the water, and Greeley's men weren't the only ones hunting. May laid Naya on the small cot near the stove, where the warm light flickered like a dying ember. The girl's breath was shallow now, her body a bundle of heat and sweat. "Get her warm," Mrs. Lynn said, moving to the small stove in the corner. "I'll make tea. You're going to need it." Isaiah didn't argue. He pulled the blanket tighter around Naya, looking down at the girl. There was no telling how long they had before she slipped away completely. Her life was tied to that paper in his coat, but every step he took toward Silver Creek only seemed to bring him closer to a noose. Mrs. Lynn brought the tea over, but Isaiah hardly touched it. His eyes were on the window, on the street outside, watching for any sign of trouble. The first thing that hit him was the smell. The town stank of tension, of something burning in the air that no one could put out. The second thing that hit him was the sound, the soft click of boots on the hard dirt, the whisper of voices just beyond the window. "Greeley," May said quietly, looking toward the door. Isaiah didn't move. He didn't need to. He could feel it in the air, the threat that hung just beyond reach. They were running out of time. Mrs. Lynn stepped back, glancing nervously at the window. "They'll be coming for you," she said. "You can't stay here. Not with her." Isaiah stood, his hand going to the door. "We won't stay." He glanced at May. She looked at him, a silent understanding between them. They had to go. There was no other option. He motioned for May to follow as he moved toward the back door. He knew they couldn't risk getting caught. Couldn't risk running into Greeley's men. Not now. Outside, the cold air hit him like a slap. His breath came in ragged bursts, but he kept moving. As they made their way down the alley, Isaiah felt the weight of every step. The town was closing in on them, but they couldn't stay hidden forever. They reached the alley's end and turned toward the main street. A figure stepped out of the shadows, too tall, too familiar. It was one of Greeley's men. Isaiah froze. May's hand went to the knife at her side, but Isaiah held up a hand. "You don't need to fight," Isaiah said, his voice low, steady. "We're leaving, that's all." The man's eyes flicked to the bundle in May's arms, then back to Isaiah. "You think they're just going to let you walk out of here?" Isaiah's grip tightened on the coat pocket where the paper sat. It was the only thing standing between him and the man in front of him, between Naya's life and death. "We don't have a choice," Isaiah said, his voice colder than he intended. "You don't either." The man took a step closer, but Isaiah wasn't going to wait for him to make the first move. He grabbed May's arm, pulling her into the next alley. They ran fast as they could, heartbeats pounding in their chests, but the sound of pursuit was already on them, boots slapping against the dirt, more than one set of them. Isaiah's mind raced, but there was only one thing to do now: get to the courthouse before Greeley got to them. May glanced over at him. "We're running out of time." Isaiah's teeth ground together. That's what they're counting on. They kept running. The clock was ticking, and they were still running out of time. Isaiah didn't stop running until the streets of Silver Creek were far behind. May was still beside him, Naya's weight an unspoken burden between them. The girl's breath had grown weak, her pulse erratic, faint at best. The night felt colder, the weight of their time running out heavier. They moved quickly through the side streets, eyes darting back and forth for any sign of Greeley's men. But Isaiah's thoughts were on the letter, the one that had brought them this far, the one that held the key to saving everything. If he could just make it to the courthouse, just get the papers stamped, there might be a chance. But each step felt like a lifetime. Time was against them. By the time they reached the front of the courthouse, the building stood silent under the moonlight. But Isaiah knew better. Silence was a trap. Inside, the clerk was at the counter, the office dark but for the flicker of a single lantern. Isaiah stepped forward, his boots quiet on the wooden floor. But the moment he crossed the threshold, the clerk's eyes narrowed. "Not yet," the clerk said, his voice low. "You're late." Isaiah's stomach twisted. The deadline was here, and the window was closing fast. He'd been prepared for this, but even he couldn't hide the tension in his jaw. He moved to the counter, his fingers brushing the edges of the envelope that held the papers, the document that could end everything, or make it worse. He needed that stamp. He needed it now. "Time's up," the clerk said, glancing at the clock on the wall. "No more signatures tonight. You're too late." Isaiah's mind raced. He could feel the presence behind him, the weight of someone waiting just outside the door. Greeley's men had to be close. "I need you to stamp it," Isaiah said, his voice even, but carrying a silent threat. His hand gripped the envelope a little tighter. "I'm not leaving without it." The clerk didn't budge. His eyes flicked to the door and back to Isaiah. "You know what'll happen if you push this," the clerk warned, his voice shaking. "You think Greeley will just let you walk away? Let that girl walk away?" Isaiah didn't answer. He didn't need to. His eyes told the clerk what he already knew. The sound of boots in the hallway grew louder. Isaiah's grip tightened around the papers. He'd made his decision. He wasn't walking away empty-handed. Not now. A shadow moved at the doorway, and Greeley stepped in, his smirk wide, his men flanking him. The air in the room shifted. May stiffened beside Isaiah, but he didn't look at her. His focus was on Greeley and the man who was about to make this even worse. "You're making a big mistake," Greeley said, his voice smooth, almost soothing. "You're holding on to something that doesn't belong to you." Isaiah's hand hovered over the envelope. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, but his mind stayed sharp. He knew exactly what Greeley was after. He'd known from the moment Naya came into the picture. "You know what you're asking for," Isaiah said, not taking his eyes off Greeley. "But I'm not handing her over." Greeley took a step closer. "Then you'll lose everything. Your ranch, your freedom, and your little Apache girl." A quiet beat. The choice hanging in the air like a gunshot waiting to happen. Isaiah could feel May's breath beside him, a silent plea in the way she held her position. He knew she was thinking the same thing. There was no way back now. "Give me the girl," Greeley said, his tone turning colder, darker. "You have no idea what this will cost you." Isaiah's jaw clenched. The choice was simple. Give Naya to Greeley, let him have his way, or risk it all. He gritted his teeth and placed the papers on the counter. "I'll pay the price, Greeley," Isaiah said, his voice steady, his words final. "But I won't give her up." For a moment, there was nothing but silence, the room holding its breath. Greeley's smirk faltered, then disappeared altogether. Isaiah stood his ground, but his hand was still over the papers. The deadline had passed, but this was no longer about time. It was about survival. And there was no way Isaiah was walking out of this without a fight. Isaiah didn't have time to wonder what the hell Greeley had planned next. The sound of crackling wood from the far side of town told him everything he needed to know. Fire. Raiders weren't just after his land anymore. They were burning everything in their path. He turned sharply, grabbing May's arm as they both dashed out of the courthouse. Naya was still in her arms, barely conscious, but her grip on May had tightened somehow. Even in her pain, she held on. "You're not leaving her," Greeley's voice came from behind. "Not like this." Isaiah didn't respond, his boots pounding against the dirt road. The fire wasn't the only threat in town now. Greeley's men were everywhere. The streets felt empty, but Isaiah knew better. The silence before the storm. They reached the edge of town just as the first gust of wind kicked up a swirl of ash. The barn, his barn, was already fully engulfed. Flames reached high, lapping at the sky like a wild thing, hungry and relentless. He could see the shadows of townsfolk running, some toward the fire, some away. But no one was coming to help. No one but the few who were as trapped as him. "Get her to the barn," Isaiah growled to May, but his voice cracked under the weight of what he was about to do. He couldn't leave. He couldn't. May nodded, fear in her eyes. She was already running ahead, her pace quicker, her steps more sure than his, as if she knew there was only one way to survive. He caught a glimpse of her looking back. "There's no turning back now," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. Isaiah didn't say a word. He followed, stepping around the burning debris, moving fast, moving quiet. He wasn't sure if it was the smoke in the air or just the tension of the moment, but it felt like the ground itself was holding its breath. The barn. They had to get there. Then, from the shadows, came the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Not just one or two, dozens. "They're coming," May whispered, and Isaiah's grip on his rifle tightened. He didn't know if he could fight his way out of this. He wasn't sure he could protect anyone, but he wasn't about to let Greeley get away with it. The smoke thickened, and the night seemed to choke under the weight of what was coming. Isaiah moved forward again, the barn in sight. But it wasn't just the fire he was running toward now. It was the choice, the one he couldn't ignore any longer. The men. Greeley's men. They were closing in. Isaiah slammed through the door of the barn, eyes scanning the dim light for any sign of movement. May was already by the wall, her hands pressing against Naya's chest as the girl's breathing grew weaker. "They're right behind us," Isaiah muttered, taking a knee beside them. He reached for the rifle strapped to his back and laid it beside him. There was no use pretending, no more hiding. He couldn't run anymore. May's eyes were frantic, but her voice was steady. "You can't let them take her, Isaiah. Not now. Not when we're this close." Isaiah looked down at Naya, the girl whose life had tied them all together. She was small, barely more than a child, but her strength was something else. The way she clung to May, even in her pain. "I don't know if I can save you," Isaiah muttered, barely louder than a whisper. But he didn't need to say it out loud. The look on May's face said everything. The walls of the barn creaked under the pressure of the smoke outside, the heat pressing in. But it was the sound of boots crunching on the dirt outside that told Isaiah his time was up. "They're here," he said, his voice steady. May didn't need any more words. She stood, pulling Naya to her feet. Together they faced the door, knowing what was coming next. Isaiah grabbed his rifle, the weight of it both familiar and heavy in his hands. He stood beside May, ready to fight. And just as the door burst open, he knew there would be no turning back now. Isaiah's eyes darted across the smoke-filled room, his heart pounding like a war drum. The flames outside the barn had grown, licking at the air, but he couldn't focus on that now. They were here, just outside. Greeley's men, the raiders, were closing in. May stood a few paces away, her hand on Naya's forehead, trying to keep the girl's breathing steady, her eyes scanning the dark barn for any sign of the enemy. Isaiah could feel the weight of the moment pressing in on him, the thick tension hanging between the people in the room like a death sentence. They were trapped. And it wasn't just the fire or the men outside that threatened them. It was the truth about what they were carrying. The ledger, the one thing that could ruin Greeley's empire, was in his possession. A ledger that held all the evidence of his crimes. A ledger that they could use to end the nightmare once and for all. But that same ledger, the key to everything, was now a target on their backs. As the sound of boots drew nearer, Isaiah's mind raced. He didn't have much time. He had to make a decision. He had to trust the only ally they had left, Martha Rudd. The woman who, just a few hours ago, had given them a chance to get out of this mess. May turned sharply toward him. Her expression was one of quiet determination, but her eyes were filled with worry. "We need to move," she whispered. "We can't stay here much longer." Isaiah nodded, but before he could respond, the barn door creaked open, the light from the fire outside casting long shadows into the dark room. He gripped his rifle tighter, ready for whatever was coming through the door. But it wasn't raiders. It was Martha Rudd. "Is everything ready?" Martha's voice was low, almost a whisper, but there was urgency in it. "I brought what you need." Isaiah didn't ask how she had found them. He didn't care. She was here, and that was all that mattered. She stepped into the barn, holding a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "This is it," she said, her voice steady. "A copy of the debt note. The one Greeley used to control the bank. The one he thought he had you cornered with." Isaiah took the bundle from her hands, his mind spinning. It was the same note that had been used to seize his land, the note that could ruin Greeley if it fell into the wrong hands. But there was something strange in the air now, something he couldn't place. He looked at Martha, trying to read her face. "What's going on, Martha?" he asked, his voice edged with suspicion. "Why help us?" Martha hesitated for a moment, her eyes flicking toward May and Naya. Then her face softened. "Because I don't want to see anyone else suffer the way my family did. Greeley took everything from us. I'm doing this for the people who can't fight back, Isaiah. For people like you." Isaiah could feel the weight of the decision hanging over him. Trusting Martha was a gamble. But in this moment, it was the only gamble he had left. He unwrapped the cloth carefully, his eyes scanning the paper inside. The note looked real, just as Greeley would have made it. But something was off. The ink, the paper, even the way it was folded, it didn't feel right. His hand trembled slightly as he turned it over. That's when he saw it. A small symbol, one he had seen before, back when he was a kid. The symbol of the Greeley family, hidden in the folds of the paper. "Wait," Isaiah muttered, his voice low. This is a fake." Martha's face twisted with frustration. "What are you talking about?" Isaiah's gaze locked onto hers, his heart sinking. "Greeley's not this stupid. He wouldn't let something this important slip. This is a trap." May's eyes widened. "What does that mean? What do we do now?" Isaiah clenched his fists. The danger was closing in on them faster than he had anticipated, and now they were in even more danger. If Greeley knew they had the fake debt note, they were as good as dead. "Get Naya to the back of the barn," Isaiah snapped, his voice sharper than before. "And don't come out unless I say so." He turned toward Martha, his face set in grim determination. "You need to get out of here. Now. Tell the others to keep their heads down. Greeley knows we have the ledger, and he's not going to stop until he gets it back." Martha nodded, her expression one of resignation. "I'll do what I can. But don't trust anyone, Isaiah. Not even me. They'll be looking for any excuse to come after you." Before Isaiah could respond, the sound of men approaching grew louder. The raiders had arrived. "Go!" Isaiah shouted, motioning toward the back exit. He had to act fast. He could hear the heavy boots crunching in the dirt, the unmistakable sound of Greeley's men making their way toward the barn. He grabbed the ledger, tucking it into his jacket. His heart was hammering in his chest. This was it. They had one shot at survival, one shot to bring this to an end. But it wasn't going to be easy. Isaiah knew that much. And as the door to the barn swung open, he knew one thing for certain. There was no going back now, to be continued. The wind howled through the night, carrying with it the scent of burning hay and the sharp tang of fear. Isaiah's heart was still pounding from the close call at the barn, his breath quick and shallow as he crouched behind a large pile of timber, watching the flickering lights of Greeley's men circle the perimeter. The fire was still raging, sending up thick plumes of smoke that masked their movements. But they were coming. He could feel it in his bones. May crouched beside him, her hand on Naya's shoulder, the girl now unconscious from the pain. Every breath she took was shallow, ragged. Isaiah could see the bruise on her cheek, the blood-stained bandages, but it was the look in her eyes that haunted him. The look of someone who had seen too much, too soon, and was now being forced into a fight she couldn't escape. "We have to make it to the warehouse," May whispered, her voice tight. "It's the only way." Isaiah nodded, his gaze flicking to the dark silhouettes of Greeley's men who were starting to fan out, their voices low but unmistakable. They were getting closer. He could feel the eyes of his enemies pressing in, the weight of their malice hanging over him. "I know," Isaiah muttered under his breath, "but there's more at stake than just us now. We have the ledger, and I'm not about to let it fall into Greeley's hands. Not after everything he's done." May's hand tightened on his arm, a silent plea for him to stay calm, to think clearly. But there was no time for calm. Not now. The trap was already set. Suddenly, a low voice broke through the tension, a whisper in the night. "You two head to the back entrance." Martha's voice carried through the darkness. "I'll take care of the front. Keep moving. Don't stop until you're inside." Isaiah's head snapped toward her, and for a brief moment, their eyes locked. Martha was determined, but her face was pale, drawn tight with fear. "Stay safe," he called softly, just loud enough for her to hear. Then he turned to May and Naya, motioning for them to move. They darted through the shadows, the ground beneath their boots soft from the rain earlier in the day. Every step felt like it could be their last, but Isaiah kept moving, determined not to falter. His eyes never left the dark outline of the warehouse ahead. The door was just ahead, but the distance between them and safety seemed to stretch endlessly. They were halfway there when the first shot rang out. It wasn't a warning shot. It was a statement. Isaiah froze, his instincts screaming at him to duck, to move. May yanked Naya closer, shielding the girl's body with her own. Isaiah looked around, his heart racing, but there was no time to react. The raiders were closing in, and they were armed. "Move!" Isaiah barked, pulling May toward the side of the warehouse. The door was ahead, but the shadows had begun to crawl toward them, every movement growing more frantic. He heard footsteps behind him, and without hesitation, he spun around, drawing his rifle and aiming it toward the source of the noise. "Stop!" a voice called out from the dark. "Drop the weapon, Isaiah." It was Deputy Jonah, the man who had once been a friend, but now, with the full weight of Greeley's gold behind him, was nothing more than another tool of the corrupt. He stood just inside the circle of light cast by the fire, his rifle trained on Isaiah. Isaiah's hand tightened on his rifle, but he didn't pull the trigger. Not yet. "What do you want, Jonah?" Isaiah's voice was cold, edged with the weight of everything that had led them here. You know what Greeley's doing. You know it's wrong. Jonah's eyes flickered for a moment, but his voice remained firm. It's over, Isaiah. Greeley owns this town. You should have stayed out of it. May stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. We're not going to let him get away with it. Isaiah's gaze never left Jonah's, his mind calculating, weighing the cost of every word, every action. His rifle remained pointed toward the deputy, but his eyes were scanning the shadows, looking for any sign of movement. And then he saw it. The figure in the distance. More raiders, approaching from the east. The moment was slipping away. He had to make a choice. Jonah, Isaiah said, his voice low, you can walk away. You can tell them you didn't see us. You can make this right. But Jonah only shook his head. It's too late for that. Before Isaiah could react, Jonah's hand twitched, and a gunshot rang out. Isaiah moved fast, too fast. He dove, pulling May and Naya down with him, but the bullet grazed his shoulder. Pain exploded in his side, but he ignored it, focusing only on the immediate danger. Go, he shouted to May. Get Naya inside. I'll hold them off. May didn't hesitate. She grabbed Naya's hand and sprinted toward the back entrance of the warehouse, disappearing into the shadows, just as Isaiah turned to face the incoming threat. Jonah and his men advanced slowly, their boots crunching on the gravel. They were closing in, and every second counted. Isaiah's hand was steady as he raised his rifle, his eyes narrowing. He was alone, but not for long. He had made his choice. He had no other option now. The fight was only beginning. To be continued. As we come to the end of this journey, we are reminded of the timeless power of courage, resilience, and the bonds that form even in the most trying of circumstances. Isaiah's struggle wasn't just for survival. It was for justice, for a promise made, and for the protection of those who needed him most. Just like the stories our grandparents would tell us by the firelight, this tale speaks to the heart, urging us to stand firm in the face of adversity, no matter how high the stakes. In a world that can often seem full of shadows, stories like these remind us that the light of hope can still shine through, if we choose to fight for it. We hope Isaiah's journey has touched your heart as deeply as it did ours. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of the story moved you the most? Did you find yourself rooting for Isaiah, or perhaps for the secret he carried? Share your feelings with us, and let's continue this conversation together. And remember, you're never too old to enjoy a good story, so share this with your friends and family, and let's keep the legacy of these stories alive. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to bringing you more stories filled with heart, grit, and the spirit of the Old West. Keep your eyes on the horizon, because the next adventure is just around the corner. The wind howled through the night, carrying with it the scent of burning hay and the sharp tang of fear. Isaiah's heart was still pounding from the close call at the barn, his breath quick and shallow as he crouched behind a large pile of timber, watching the flickering lights of Greeley's men circle the perimeter. The fire was still raging, sending up thick plumes of smoke that masked their movements. But they were coming. He could feel it in his bones. May crouched beside him, her hand on Naya's shoulder, the girl now unconscious from the pain. Every breath she took was shallow, ragged. Isaiah could see the bruise on her cheek, the blood-stained bandages, but it was the look in her eyes that haunted him. The look of someone who had seen too much, too soon, and was now being forced into a fight she couldn't escape. "We have to make it to the warehouse," May whispered, her voice tight. "It's the only way." Isaiah nodded, his gaze flicking to the dark silhouettes of Greeley's men who were starting to fan out, their voices low but unmistakable. They were getting closer. He could feel the eyes of his enemies pressing in, the weight of their malice hanging over him. "I know," Isaiah muttered under his breath, "but there's more at stake than just us now. We have the ledger, and I'm not about to let it fall into Greeley's hands. Not after everything he's done." May's hand tightened on his arm, a silent plea for him to stay calm, to think clearly. But there was no time for calm. Not now. The trap was already set. Suddenly, a low voice broke through the tension, a whisper in the night. "You two head to the back entrance." Martha's voice carried through the darkness. "I'll take care of the front. Keep moving. Don't stop until you're inside." Isaiah's head snapped toward her, and for a brief moment, their eyes locked. Martha was determined, but her face was pale, drawn tight with fear. "Stay safe," he called softly, just loud enough for her to hear. Then he turned to May and Naya, motioning for them to move. They darted through the shadows, the ground beneath their boots soft from the rain earlier in the day. Every step felt like it could be their last, but Isaiah kept moving, determined not to falter. His eyes never left the dark outline of the warehouse ahead. The door was just ahead, but the distance between them and safety seemed to stretch endlessly. They were halfway there when the first shot rang out. It wasn't a warning shot. It was a statement. Isaiah froze, his instincts screaming at him to duck, to move. May yanked Naya closer, shielding the girl's body with her own. Isaiah looked around, his heart racing, but there was no time to react. The raiders were closing in, and they were armed. "Move!" Isaiah barked, pulling May toward the side of the warehouse. The door was ahead, but the shadows had begun to crawl toward them, every movement growing more frantic. He heard footsteps behind him, and without hesitation, he spun around, drawing his rifle and aiming it toward the source of the noise. "Stop!" a voice called out from the dark. "Drop the weapon, Isaiah." It was Deputy Jonah, the man who had once been a friend, but now, with the full weight of Greeley's gold behind him, was nothing more than another tool of the corrupt. He stood just inside the circle of light cast by the fire, his rifle trained on Isaiah. Isaiah's hand tightened on his rifle, but he didn't pull the trigger. Not yet. "What do you want, Jonah?" Isaiah's voice was cold, edged with the weight of everything that had led them here. "You know what Greeley's doing. You know it's wrong." Jonah's eyes flickered for a moment, but his voice remained firm. "It's over, Isaiah. Greeley owns this town. You should have stayed out of it." May stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're not going to let him get away with it." Isaiah's gaze never left Jonah's, his mind calculating, weighing the cost of every word, every action. His rifle remained pointed toward the deputy, but his eyes were scanning the shadows, looking for any sign of movement. And then he saw it. The figure in the distance. More raiders, approaching from the east. The moment was slipping away. He had to make a choice. "Jonah," Isaiah said, his voice low, "you can walk away." You can tell them you didn't see us. You can make this right. But Jonah only shook his head. It's too late for that. Before Isaiah could react, Jonah's hand twitched, and a gunshot rang out. Isaiah moved fast, too fast. He dove, pulling May and Naya down with him, but the bullet grazed his shoulder. Pain exploded in his side, but he ignored it, focusing only on the immediate danger. "Go," he shouted to May. "Get Naya inside. I'll hold them off." May didn't hesitate. She grabbed Naya's hand and sprinted toward the back entrance of the warehouse, disappearing into the shadows, just as Isaiah turned to face the incoming threat. Jonah and his men advanced slowly, their boots crunching on the gravel. They were closing in, and every second counted. Isaiah's hand was steady as he raised his rifle, his eyes narrowing. He was alone, but not for long. He had made his choice. He had no other option now. The fight was only beginning. To be continued. As we come to the end of this journey, we are reminded of the timeless power of courage, resilience, and the bonds that form even in the most trying of circumstances. Isaiah's struggle wasn't just for survival. It was for justice, for a promise made, and for the protection of those who needed him most. Just like the stories our grandparents would tell us by the firelight, this tale speaks to the heart, urging us to stand firm in the face of adversity, no matter how high the stakes. In a world that can often seem full of shadows, stories like these remind us that the light of hope can still shine through, if we choose to fight for it. We hope Isaiah's journey has touched your heart as deeply as it did ours. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, subscribe.